Software engineers have a skill that can be applied to solve problems outside of a code base, in real life. Analytical skills can be used to evaluate investment opportunities. Creative thinking can be used to build businesses. Communication skills can be used to build and enhance relationships. John Sonmez is a software engineer who created The Simple Programmer, a community of developers who discuss strategies around software, business, and life. He joined me on the show to discuss these topics and others, as well as his new book, The Complete Software Developer's Career Guide. John is the author of Soft Skills, which is a popular book that engineers often purchase when they need to develop those soft skills. And I highly recommend an episode that he did on Software Engineering Radio about developing soft skills. It's a classic, and I'll put it in the show notes. By the way, Software Engineering Daily is looking for sponsors for Q3. If your company has a product or a service, or if you're hiring, Software Engineering Daily reaches 24,000 developers listening daily. Send me an email, jeff@softwareengineeringdaily.com, if you're interested in sponsoring the show. Now let's get on with this episode with John Sonmez. Hosting this podcast is my full-time job, but I love to build software. I'm constantly writing down ideas for products, the user experience designs, the software architecture, and even the pricing models. Of course, someone needs to write the actual code for these products that I think about. For building and scaling my software products, I use Toptal. Toptal is the best place to find reasonably priced, extremely talented software engineers to build your projects from scratch or to scale your workforce. Get started today and receive a free pair of Apple Airpods after your first 20 hours of work by signing up at toptal.com/sedaily. There is none of the frustration of interviewing freelancers who aren't suitable for the job. 90% of Toptal clients hire the first expert that they are introduced to. The average time to getting matched with a top developer is less than 24 hours, so you can get your project started quickly. Go to toptal.com/sedaily to start working with an engineer who can build your project, or who can add to the workforce of the company that you work at. I've used Toptal to build 3 separate engineering projects, and I genuinely love the product. Also, as a special offer to Software Engineering Daily listeners, Toptal will be sending out a pair of Apple Airpods to everyone who signs up through our link and engages in a minimum of 20 work hours. To check it out and start putting your ideas into action, go to toptal.com/sedaily. And if you're an engineer looking for freelance work, I also recommend Toptal. All of the developers I've worked with have been very happy with the platform. Thanks to Toptal for being a sponsor of Software Engineering Daily. John Sonmez is an author, a teacher, and an entrepreneur. John, welcome to Software Engineering Daily.
Thanks. Glad to be here.
So you write a lot about the softer skills that an engineer needs to develop and should develop, in addition to a lot of the technical content that you produce. But I want to start off talking about the broader subject of skill development, because it's something that you've spent a lot of time thinking about. What are the skills that software engineers frequently don't develop as much as they should?
So let's see. So we could talk about definitely from 3 different angles. I would say foremost the soft skills, but I kind of get the impression that you're looking for not to go down the soft skills road just yet. Is that right?
I think you could go down either route. I'm mostly curious because you see people in different places in their career arc. So you probably see people early on and in the middle of their career and later on in their career. And there's probably some themes, whether they are technical skills or softer skills, that you say, wow, if this person would have just knocked it out earlier on in their career, they would have compounded much more interest throughout their career. So I think that, just the skills that are the most valuable yet get underdeveloped.
Okay, yeah. So I would say, definitely by far and large, the biggest one that's most valuable, that will have the largest compound interest for, I think, any person, not just a software developer, over the course of their life, is the ability to learn, to be able to teach themselves, self-education. That's one of the biggest things, because I'd probably rank some of the soft skills type of things after that. But if you have the ability to teach yourself, if you have that ability of self-education, then everything becomes accessible to you. Everything, all the doors open up to you, and you no longer rely on what other people tell you. You no longer rely on the system in order to educate yourself, and you can go in any direction that you want. So I think that's probably the most valuable skill, and it's surprisingly underdeveloped. A lot of developers are self-taught, but they still don't really have the skill. They still don't really have a really good handle on how to teach themselves new things quickly, how to learn quickly, how to absorb information. A lot of the ways that we tend to learn is we tend to read a book cover to cover, or we go and enroll in a class, and that's usually not the most efficient way to learn and to self-educate yourself. And it requires you to have a teacher. It requires you to go and go down a traditional path. But I try to teach a lot of developers how to quickly pick up information. If you want to learn something, how are you going to learn it as efficiently as possible? And I think that's something that I found that has been extremely valuable, not just in my development career, but in my life in general.
I like that choice because that's a recursive skill. I mean, if you're learning how to learn, then you're going to learn the other subsequent skills that are going to help you more quickly. I also think it's an infinitely difficult thing to do. I certainly check myself on a regular basis and say, oh, I'm making some sort of a mental bias that's keeping me from learning as quickly as I should be doing. So, I think that's a skill that one never stops developing.
Oh yeah, definitely. It's a lifetime skill, just like learning itself is a lifetime skill, and you get better at it as you figure out. You're working with a very small amount of available memory that's accessible, of RAM in your head, and even your retrieval process is not as efficient as you'd like it to be. So you've got to figure out really that how to learn things where you don't have to know everything, but you know enough and you can navigate enough to find the pieces that you want. Almost like making, one of the ways I approach it today is utilizing what we have, using Google as an extension of my brain, right? Because I don't need to know a bunch of stuff that I can look up easily, but I do need to know what I need to look up, and that's really the key today. I mean, back in the day, before we had our brains connected to the internet and all of the available information that we had to memorize stuff, and it had to be in our heads. But now we can almost index into, right? We need an index in our head, not the actual data.
So what I like about your material is you have focus on both the short-term and the long-term thinking. I think there's a lot that has been written and content that's been produced about short-term tactics for improvement, and that stuff is always valuable. But as somebody who's built a lot of different angles to your career that are kind of building and evolving in different ways, I can sense that there's an attitude of long-term thinking to how you have built your career to where it is today. How much long-term thinking should an engineer do, and how does long-term thinking factor into creating and crafting a career that a software engineer will enjoy for the duration of their life?
That's a great question. That's a question everyone should be asking themselves, I think, because that is one of the questions of life, really, of your career. And I've thought about this a lot. Really, where my thinking on this comes from is from two places: from computer science algorithms, but more so from real-time strategy games. I used to play, resource management games like StarCraft back in the day, and World of Warcraft, and all that. Those games where you have to manage resources. And if you've played one of those games, you know that the best strategy that you could possibly do in the game, well, the best way you could invest resources is long term, right? Is if in StarCraft you had those big Protoss carrier ships that had the biggest units that cost the most. The relative cost to the damage they did was so great. They did so much more damage to the relative cost, but they cost a lot, so you'd have to sacrifice resources up front. So I think of life and your career in the same way. You can think of it in finances. You can think of time you invest. If you could optimize for long term only, that would be the best thing possible. But in the meantime, you got to pay the rent. You got to eat, right? You got to take care of other things that require your time. So you do have to do some short-term thinking in order to survive long enough in order to benefit from the long term. So the optimal strategy, optimal solution to this problem is to make sure that you're setting yourself up for the long term as much as possible, with one caveat, which is that you have to live long enough, or you have to have enough of the time that you actually benefit from the long term for it to be worth the investment. So for example, if we looked at this from the financial perspective, right, the best way you could possibly invest your money to make the most money financially would be long term. Right? I mean, if you just looked at something like, let's say, CDs, or most of the investment vehicles that you were locking up your money for the long term, that's going to have the highest yield. But let's say that I gave you some kind of investment where I said, okay, I created this crazy CD, certificate of deposit, right? And I said, okay, what I'm going to do is, if you'll lock up your money for the next 50 years, then, and you can't touch it, then I'm going to give you, a 3,000% return on your money per year. Let's say. I mean, that's a ridiculous amount, right? It doesn't matter, because you can't spend that money because you'll be dead, right? So you got to find that optimal point, and I think that's such in life, right? And that's why I'm actually, not to side tangent here, but I'm against 401k and retirement plans, because my philosophy and my theory of life is, you know what? I really don't care when I'm 65. Like if I want to make it now and live and enjoy the fruits of my labor in an earlier time period, doesn't mean that I'm not investing for the long term, but I'm thinking a little bit differently, not that long, right? So again, if we go back to the career, if you look at different stages of life, like for me, I don't bill by the hour as much as I can avoid it as possible. If I bill by the hour now, I bill at a minimum of $2,000 an hour is my hourly rate. And I know that sounds ridiculous, and you say, oh, most people aren't going to pay that. Yeah, but some people do, and if they're willing to pay that, then I'm willing to make a short-term decision. Other than that, almost everything else I work on in my career, in my life, is long-term. Even like recording this podcast, it's going to go out there. It's going to last a while, right? All of the stuff that I build, the stuff that I work on, because I know that that's going to have a bigger payoff and benefit down in the long run, right? I'm building those carrier ships in StarCraft. I know that I'm going to invest my resources best that way. So I'd say, to try to tie it to something practical as a developer starting out, or as a developer considering these things, right? You want to think about spending as much time as possible long term, and just getting by as much as possible in the short term. So what can you do? Can you cut your expenses as much as possible? Can you emphasize learning and developing your skill set more than making the salary now, right? Can you invest in marketing yourself, building a blog, doing podcasts, anything that's going to have that long-term payoff, doing maybe YouTube videos and tutorials, right? All of those things. And a lot of times that's why I advise a lot of developers. I say, hey, look, only work 40 hours for your employer. And spend the first 2 hours or first hour of your day creating something long-term for yourself, building your blog, creating a project, creating a business, something like that, because that's going to have the bigger payoff in the long run. But this is like a fantastic question that we could talk about this all day, because there's so much you could think about to optimize it. But it really just comes down to, if I laid it out to one simple principle, it'd be optimize as much as possible for the long term, for the near long term, right? Not the too far long term.
Simplify continuous delivery with GoCD, the on-premise, open-source, continuous delivery tool by ThoughtWorks. With GoCD, you can easily model complex deployment workflows using pipelines and visualize them end-to-end with the value stream map. You get complete visibility into and control over your company's deployments. At gocd.org/sedaily, find out how to bring continuous delivery to your teams. Say goodbye to deployment panic and hello to consistent, predictable deliveries. Visit gocd.org/sedaily to learn more about GoCD. Commercial support and enterprise add-ons, including disaster recovery, are available. Thanks to GoCD for being a continued sponsor of Software Engineering Daily. And so if let's say I think there's two broad categories of people who listen to this show, and one is developers who are just starting out, or they're doing a coding boot camp, they're switching from another career into software engineering, and the other category is somebody who's been an engineer for a while. And there's also a subset of people who have already started a business, or they're entrepreneurial, they're very happy with what they're doing. For those people, this may not apply as much, but for the people who are early on in their career, or they're a little bit advanced in their career, and they're hearing this, okay, I can do stuff on the side, I'll only allocate 40 hours to my day-to-day employer. Why should I allocate only 40 hours to my day-to-day employer and spend the rest of my time doing other stuff, like building my, quote, personal brand, rather than doubling down on my career growth? Like, why wouldn't I focus on the corporate job and go deep on the corporate job and try to really do well in that kind of traditional position?
For a couple of reasons. One of them, it's a fallacy to believe that putting in more hours for a corporate job will actually benefit you or get you to raise the corporate ladder. In fact, it may show that you're somewhat of a patsy, and that you're, and it may cause you to be stepped on and utilized and used. I would say, in my whole career as a software developer, I'm not saying that I never did put in the time and work extra hours, but from a large portion of it, in the latter half of it as a software developer, I limited my work to 40 hours, even in places where people were working 60 and 70 hours. And not only did I not get fired, I got promoted more, and I got paid more, and I was the highest paid developer because I thought my time was valuable, and so did other people. Mostly people, this is just a good life lesson, is that mostly people will think of you what you think of you, what you honestly think of you, not what you pretend. But if you honestly think your time is valuable and you think you're a valuable person, there's no reason why other people aren't going to think the same of that. And that's just a general idea. But to get more specific here, I would say that you're taking a huge gamble if you're going to invest in one company, invest a huge amount of your time in one company, thinking you're going to climb the corporate ladder. And not only are you taking a huge gamble, but doing that kind of thinking has what I call bounded upsides, but really. You want to aim for things that, if you're going to invest a lot of time in things, if you're going to invest in things, you want to aim for things that have unbounded upsides, right? So for example, it doesn't matter how good you are or how many hours you put in and how much you climb the corporate ladder, you're going to hit a ceiling. You're going to hit a glass ceiling at some point, and you're going to be stopped. You're never going to get paid as a developer a salary of, I don't know, say $500,000 or $1 million. Probably not, right? Unless inflation goes wild, but based on today's numbers. But if you're an entrepreneur, if you started your own business, if you have other income coming in, right? If you've invested in that way, there is no cap. It's an unbounded upside thing. Now, the chances of you becoming a Mark Zuckerberg and making billions and billions of dollars, very low. But you've got a pretty high probability of something that could actually result in a much bigger score in the long run. And so I think a lot of developers too, the times have changed, right? Our parents have told us, go to school, go to college, get good grades, and then go get a good job and climb the corporate ladder. And that's not true anymore, because right now there's not as much stability in working for a single employer as there was, right? The economy is changing. I mean, look at the gig economy, look at Uber, and look at all these displacements going on in places where, what are taxi drivers thinking right now? A lot of unions are really in trouble because there's no security of a regular job. So if you go and invest all your time, if you're working 60, 70-hour weeks for some company, whether it be a corporate job or a startup, which is even worse because that's just a lottery ticket, and there's really no guaranteed payoff there at all. But if you spend all that time and you're investing in building someone else's empire and doing, and honestly, the other piece of this too is those hours don't benefit you very much as far as your own personal development, because there's a difference between just working hours and deliberate practice. And so what I'm saying is, hey, look, take those, you invest all that time, you may not get a payoff, you may get laid off, it's not going to carry over necessarily to another job, right? So it's pretty a pretty bad bet, but take those extra hours. If you're going to work 60-hour weeks, I'm all for it. Hell, I work 70-hour weeks most weeks, probably more than that, a lot of my career. But I took those extra 20 or 30 hours per week and I put that to work for myself. Now, sometimes I was building a business, but sometimes it was just reading a lot and investing in my career or learning a new programming language on my own, right? And just enhancing my skills, because that has a payoff that exists outside of that particular entity or company, right? It's very, very limited in short-term thinking to think I'm going to climb the corporate ladder at some company, or I'm going to kill it with this startup and they're going to promote me up. That's not necessarily true, and those things don't carry over. I'd rather invest. Again, we talked about the investing in the long-term thinking, investing 20 hours extra at your company to hopefully climb the corporate ladder is short-term thinking. Investing the extra 20 hours in your career, learning a new programming languages, learning a new skill, building a business, building a blog, marketing yourself, any of those things, that's long-term thinking.
Right. And I think what you're saying is it's more about allocating this time to, like, you say, I'm going to work 70 hours a week, 40 hours for my day-to-day job, 30 hours for myself, and then under that arc, you could do that 30-hour arc of working for yourself, you could do any variety of things. And whether you are starting a business and you have a long-term view for that business right now, for that side business, or you're just reading and kind of sitting low and just kind of thinking about opportunities, that can be really valuable. Like, you made a lot of money teaching courses on Pluralsight, and it was an opportunity that surprised you. Like, as far as I understand, you kind of stumbled onto that and was like, whoa, this is actually really valuable. So how do you look at the idea of opportunism? Because that was, okay, this opportunity fell into your lap and then you're like, oh, okay, got to pounce on this. Is like, how do you, but it also seems like that was something that you cultivated by being ready for that opportunity to fall into your lap. So for the type of person who is, they spend 40 hours a week at work and they spend 30 hours like hacking on stuff and learning stuff and reading stuff, and they want to start a company or they want to build a software product, but they don't feel like they're ready right now, or they're kind of like waiting for the opportunity to fall into their lap. Is there a way to cultivate that opportunism and, be ready for the opportunity when it comes to you?
Oh, sure. Yeah, definitely. This is one of those things where I get into heated debates with people about, because they say, well, you got lucky, or people get lucky, or successful people get lucky, or you need luck in the equation. And I totally agree you need luck in the equation. But here's the thing that I would say is that we all have these stellar opportunities. That we're going to get like so many of them in the course of our life. But 90% of them we won't recognize, and then the ones that we do recognize, like 90% of those, we won't be prepared for. And then even of those that we do recognize and we are prepared for, I would say, and I'm just making up percentages here, but I'd say 90% of those we don't follow through enough to actually benefit. And that's the key. Like, in order to really be successful, in order for opportunity to hit you, right, it's not enough just to be prepared. It's not enough to just recognize it or to have it come to you. You've also got to have the follow through and commitment. So success really, in my mind, comes down to these three things. One, it's the commitment, right? And two, it's the persistence. And three, it's the it's the ability to work without motivation, to go on without focusing on the results when you don't feel like doing something. And so if you look at, for me, for example, with the Pluralsight, what happened there? Well, there was an opportunity that happened, but I had been working. I'd been building a blog. I'd been marketing myself. I'd been putting my name out there, working on developing my skills, a bunch of different skills. And so it made it more likely that I would have a connection that it offered me the Pluralsight opportunity. And when I had that Pluralsight opportunity, that wasn't just like, oh, okay, now here you go. Now you can just be a millionaire. There was a lot of other authors that were doing Pluralsight courses, but they didn't do as many courses as I did. I saw the opportunity, and I did 55 courses over the next couple of years, and that made the difference. But I was prepared to be able to do those. So again, it required some luck and some opportunity for that to happen. But I get lucky all the time. It happens to me all the time. I find these lucky opportunities. But it's most of the time what I've found is that we don't see them. And I could have easily not seen this one, or it could have easily passed me by. I could have not done a course, or I could have just done one course and I wouldn't have seen the opportunity, right? Or not even had the opportunity show up at all because I wasn't doing the other things to market myself. So what I would say is it comes down to this, is, you got to get up to bat all the time, and you take a ton of swings, right? And eventually you're going to connect, you're going to hit, as long as you're willing to keep on swinging and swinging and swinging. And a lot of people are waiting. They're waiting for that perfect pitch to come, and then they'll take a swing. But when that perfect pitch comes and they're like, oh yeah, this is the perfect pitch, and they go to take that swing, they realize that they don't have the muscular strength to actually swing the bat because they've never swung it before. And so if you're not willing to swing the bat and take a bunch of misses, you're not going to get it. It's just not going to line up. It's a numbers game, right? And so you've got to be taking enough swings. You got to have enough practice to be able to hit the pitch when you actually do. And then when you start hitting pitches, you got to keep on hitting that pitch. You got to run the full bases. You can't run to first base and then be out of breath and be like, oh man, this is too hard. It's too tired. Okay, that's enough. You got to be able to do all those things if you want it to line up. And I think there's a side of it too where you can't force things. I think you can't force opportunities, but it's just a matter of training. You train, and then the one day the enemy shows up at your doorstep and you're ready, right? if it's when the enemy shows up at your doorstep is not the time to start training. It's too late at that point. So it requires all of those things to be in alignment, and most people honestly aren't willing to put in the effort that's required. They just want opportunity, but they miss the fact that they've already had, they're going to have so many opportunities in their life. Most of them they're not going to be prepared for, and they're probably not going to follow through on them.
Hearing you talk about this, it kind of makes me understand the simple programmer brand, the John Sonmez brand, which is, maybe you started out just thinking, okay, I'm going to do some education stuff around like career development and some education stuff around how do you build a business. But that leads to, okay, how do you keep yourself prepared? And then that leads to, okay, here are some lifestyle suggestions. And you have these principles around stoicism and health and exercise, and pretty soon you're talking about a whole way of living that is, and there's a lot of like podcasts and blogs and material around these topics of stoicism and health and exercise, and you got people like Tim Ferriss and Ryan Holiday and all these other guys who have kind of built personal brands around this. I think this is a really good thing because a lot of these different people portray these well-proven principles that are not controversial. They're not secretive. It's the same stuff that Tony Robbins has been talking about for a long time. But do you see yourself as unique in the sense that you're portraying these principles through the lens of a programmer? Like, am I portraying your kind of your vision and your brand correctly?
Yeah, I think you are. I mean, that I would equate myself. Sometimes I tell people when they ask what I do, it's funny. I used to say I'm kind of like Tony Robbins for software developers, but I found that not enough people really understood who Tony Robbins was, and they thought, oh, so you like what I don't know what they think that he does, but you just do motivational speaking. He coaches every area of your life, right? And that's kind of what I do. So then I started saying, well, I help software developers. I teach software developers how to be cool, and that's where I've landed. Is that's what I tell people most of the time now, and it's kind of joking, but it's personal development, right? And it's kind of funny. So my lens for it is definitely different in the fact that I come from an analytical and software development mind, right? I think that is unique to it because, well, for a couple of reasons. One of them is that I'm a skeptic. I mean, I'm into the most woo-woo kind of crazy stuff, right? that people are like, man, John, really, seriously, the universe tapped you on the shoulder, John? Come on.
What's an example of that?
Well, I read books like the Power of Now, which is somewhat kind of mystical, like
Eckhart Tolle,
almost,
or what is it, Eckhart Tolle?
Yeah, exactly. And I talk about these kind of things that are out there, right? Affirmations and these kind of things but I came from an analytical, like I was so skeptical of all that stuff. And I started applying these things in my life. My path to it really came from I had the opportunity to talk to a lot of millionaires and some decamillionaires and even a couple of billionaires. And I would ask them, I'd say, hey, like, what is the number one book that you would recommend that everyone read, right? And I would ask this question. Whenever I find someone super, super successful, I assume they're not lucky. I assume that luck had a part of it, but I assume that they did those other two things I talked about. So it kept coming up, this stupid book, this dumb book called Think and Grow Rich by Napoleon Hill. And I'd read this book before, and I was like, oh, brother, give me a break. This is ridiculous. This is ridiculous stuff, right? But they kept on saying it, right? So I was like, all right, you know what? If all these guys, like, here's the problem with ignorance. If you're ignorant, you don't know you're ignorant. It's impossible to detect, right? If you think about that, right? If you are ignorant, you can never be aware of your own ignorance. It's not possible by definition, right? So I've sort of developed this philosophy in life that says, okay, sometimes when I think I know it all, when I think I'm smart, when I think I'm wise, I have to look at people, and I think other people are crazy, but they're more successful than me in some area, or they're super successful. I have to kind of say, well, is it possible that they're wiser than I am, that I'm actually ignorant, and that my analysis and everything that I've got going for me is that they're at a superior level, and I can't detect that. It just be like undetectable, right? Ignorance is undetectable. So should I just give what they say, if they're qualified, the benefit of the doubt and try it out? Right? So that's sort of what I did there. Is I reread the book with this new mindset, and I still was a little skeptical, but I started looking at some of the other books they were recommending. Again, a lot of kind of crazy stuff out there. And I started applying that stuff in my life. And man, I started getting a lot more successful. Not only a lot more successful, a lot more fulfilled and happy in my life, and felt a lot better. And I was like, wow, this is really, I got to reevaluate my position. So that sort of led into the whole thing. That's where I sort of shifted, and I still have that analytical mind, right? I'm still very skeptic at heart, even though sometimes it doesn't seem like I am. But so I approach these personal development things not from a blind follower type of viewpoint, but from one who recognizes both that there's things we do understand and we need to analyze and scrutinize those things, and there's some things that we don't understand but they just work, and maybe there's some science behind them, or maybe the universe is way more complicated than we think, but these things work. So let's just take some of these things on faith and try these things out, even though that sounds really weird to say that. So that's where I come from. I'd say there's one other thing that I bring that's unique, I think, to the space, which is I was just doing a video on this the other day, and I record 2 to 3 videos a day. And I my YouTube channel is almost like a diary for me. And so a lot of people, a lot of success gurus and stuff that you see out there, you see their success, you see their highlight reel, and you don't see how they got there, and you don't know if they're pulling the wool over your eyes and stuff. But, I go run a marathon and I film it, right? And everyone knows that I'm working out and lifting weights and going for 40 miles a week of running, and you see me on video and you see that I'm ripped with a six pack all year round, right? I'm not bullshitting you when I'm saying this stuff, right? You see how many hours I'm putting in, right? I'm talking about these things, and even just from YouTube, you see every day 2 to 3 new YouTube videos come out, right? For several years now, and so when you say, oh well, yeah, you got lucky to get 100,000 subscribers on YouTube. No, I didn't, because I showed you exactly the process that I'm following. So I think that's the piece that I try to bring that's unique, is to say, look, not only I'm not just telling you all these like mantras for success. You're seeing me do it, and you're seeing the results of it as you're watching me grow, and I'm just giving you everything that I'm learning, my mistakes, my successes, my failures, all that stuff, and you're seeing it on a daily basis. So there's no question. It's like reality TV. You can't say this didn't happen because you're seeing it. So that's sort of the unique kind of approach that I take to it.
Vivid Cortex is the best way to improve your database performance, efficiency, and uptime. It's a cloud-hosted monitoring platform that eliminates your most critical visibility gap, providing insights at 1-second granularity into production database workload and query performance. It measures the execution and resource consumption of every statement and transaction, so you can proactively fix future database issues before they impact customers. To learn more, visit vividcortex.com/sedaily. and find out why companies like GitHub, DigitalOcean, and Yelp all use Vivid Cortex to see deeper into their database performance. Learn more at vividcortex.com/sedaily and get started today with Vivid Cortex. How does fitness factor into your life as a programmer?
Well, at the very simplest level, if we talk about long-term benefits, if you die young from heart disease, or you have a low quality of life, you don't have much time to actually benefit from the long-term benefits. So, if you're not going to care about fitness at all, then you should probably try to make money real fast and spend it real fast, because you're not going to benefit from the long term. But at a bigger level, I would say that there's, so we could go back to we could go really deep into what is the basis of human psychology, and what are the basic human needs, right? What is it that has caused us as a species to do things? Why do we have jobs? Why do we make money? I know this is going to be a little bit out there, but if you really, really think about it, for the most driving biological factor, right, which evolution would say, most scientists would agree with me, even though it sounds weird when I say in this context, is the sex urge, right, is to actually procreate, right? And so at a very basic level, I could say, hey, one reason why you should get fit is just for vanity's sake, because it'll improve your odds of procreating successfully, right? which is really important to a lot. This is funny,
Very
but
reasonable.
Yeah, when I started the YouTube channel, I started getting a lot of YouTubers, right? People that are watching YouTube are 18 to 25-year-old single kind of nerdy guys, and what became very, very apparent to me was that one of their main concerns in life, which makes sense, would be, hey, how do I interact with the opposite sex? How do I get girls? How do I they don't know how to do this stuff, and so I think fitness definitely plays into that. Confidence is more important, but fitness plays into that. So I just at a very basic level, I'd say getting in shape is going to make you feel better about yourself, make you feel more confident, make you have more appeal, which is highly beneficial. But the other thing I'd say, just from a more pragmatic standpoint of for everyone that says, oh, I don't really care about that. Well, you do, but okay, well, you can talk to your own psychologist about that and dig deep into that. But let's just, from a very practical standpoint, if you're healthy and you're able to have high energy levels and you don't have things that are weighing you down, and you feel confident because you look good, you're going to be more effective. You're going to be more effective at what you do. You're going to have more energy, right? It's going to be easier for you to endure things for a longer period of time. And again, just to take one more trip back into vanity zone, guess what? Do you think that fit and good-looking people get promoted more, get more opportunities? I mean, what?
Yeah, of course. Well, of course they do.
Right. What world are we living in? We're not living in a meritocracy. We'd love to be, but we're not. I mean, I'm not saying that we shouldn't have one, but we don't. And it's probably not going to happen anytime soon. So, use every asset that you have, every advantage that you have, and that's a huge one. So, and it's one that you can absolutely control. So, I think it plays into a lot of, I always think of it this way, right? Because a lot of people ask this question like, oh, well, why fitness? Why all these things? Well, why do you teach developers about finance? It's like you got a car, okay? And if any one of those wheels on that car is flat, you may be able to drive for a little while, but pretty soon that rim is going to be, grinding and bend, and the thing is going to flip, or the car is going to stop. And so a lot of developers, a lot of people in life, they got an awesome engine. They've got, they're focusing on, they've got these awesome wheels on the tire, but they're neglecting like one or two of them. And eventually the wheels come off. Eventually the whole thing falls apart. And so you've got to focus on all these areas of life. You could be a super, super successful person and make a ton of money. And if you don't have any kind of social skills, it's not going to be too much of a benefit to you. You could have a ton of money, and if you don't have fulfillment in your life and don't know how to actually like derive your own sense of fulfillment from what you do and have meaning and purpose in your life, it's not going to matter to you. You could have all the money in the world, and you can try to spend as much money on doctors as you possibly can, but if you're overweight and you're out of shape and you've messed up your heart and you've got diabetes because of what you've done to yourself, what are you going to do? How are you going to spend that money? It's not going to be valuable to you. So I think it's important to realize that it's all connected. And as you bring up one area of your life, as you become more fit and you develop the discipline and all of those things that are required to become more fit, you're going to find that carries over to your career. You're going to find it carries over to your relationships. You're going to find it carries over to all these other areas of your life. And so that's why I go down that road.
Yeah, and I agree with those things. I really like the idea that it's like the simple programmer is really about this holistic, like viewing the life of a programmer from all these different angles because they are all intermingled, and to focus on just one aspect of those things would be at the expense of all the others because they all are intermingled and they all compound against each other. And you write about this, you do videos about this, you have podcasts about this, and there's a lot of authenticity. I think authenticity is something that you willfully want to bring to the table, and you do reflect that in a lot of your writing. Are there things that we can't talk about, like things that we can't say, or things that you can't say, like controversial issues? Because I know there are certain issues that, I try to talk about a lot of different issues of engineering. There are certain things that are so hot button or so just like, you can't talk about it. Like I don't know if you've read this essay by Paul Graham, like it's called What You Can't Say, and then his wife Jessica Livingston also wrote about this. They founded Y Combinator, and they just talk about some of the most valuable pieces of advice are about startups, at least, are things that you cannot talk about. And I think there are certain taboos, and obviously this is kind of like a meta question because I wouldn't expect you to actually say these things, but maybe are there certain areas that like they're so taboo, they're so controversial that you would at least suggest people examine like more fundamentally because nobody can actually write about them. They're just even the John Sonmez's of the world can't tell you authentically how to think about thing X.
So I would say honestly, I know this will sound fairly bold, and maybe someone will try and call me on my bullshit here, but for John Sonmez, for what I will talk about, there is no X. There is no nothing. I mean, I have done videos on porn and masturbation, and because there's no one talking about this, right? And developer, I mean, like, right? And I have to address this to my audience because my audience is facing these problems, and I have to give you an objective, a non-moralistic viewpoint on this. And I've done it, and I've talked about my own experiences with it, and why it affects you negatively, and how to overcome these things, because no one else is talking about this stuff. And here's the other thing is, not everyone should be, and not everyone could be. I agree with you in the sense that there are things that can't be talked about. But here, and this is why. Well, okay, I've got nothing to lose for a couple of reasons. One, because I'm independently wealthy from my investments, right? I don't have to work. You could take away. I could lose my sponsor. I don't give a shit. Like, it doesn't matter to me. And second, because I made a decision in my life that I'm going to live my life as boldly as possible, and whatever consequences come, they come, and that's part of life, and I'm going to deal with them regardless of what that means. That may mean that it's going to cut my life short. It doesn't matter. That's a decision I made a while back, just because of the way that I was living my life in such a guarded and protected fashion. So I'm willing to go there. But at the same time, not everyone should be. And I did a couple videos on this because people were asking me, they're like, oh, should I talk about politics and religion? And I'm like, no. Let me tell you why, okay? If you are creating a blog and a podcast and you're about, let's say that you're specializing in AngularJS, right? JavaScript, that doesn't have anything to do with that. Right? You don't go, like, you need to be controversial. Like, I talk about being polarizing, right? And I think being polarizing is extremely valuable, but you have to be polarizing along the right poles. For me, that's everything. For me, well, okay, I won't say everything, because it's everything that will give you some kind of wisdom or value in your life, right? I'm not going to talk about politics for the sake of talking about politics or just because it's my opinion. I'm not going to talk about stuff that I do not think will bring actual value to people just to be a controversial figure. I have no interest in being a controversial figure for the sake of being controversy, but like I said, I will talk about porn and masturbation and do a video on that because that is relevant, and it's going to upset people. That's fine. I've done some videos on racism. I've done some videos on white male privilege, and I've gotten a lot of heat and flack for that. But the reason why I did those videos was because I wanted to stop people from the victim mindset and mentality, and that was it wasn't to get views. It wasn't to like raise a controversy. But again, if you go back to like that JavaScript developer that sees my videos and sees my content and says, "Oh, I want to be like John. I'm gonna like do a video on Trump or on transgenderism or whatever they're gonna do a video on." I'm like, no, you're missing it. Be polarizing about JavaScript. Like say why everyone should forget about Angular 2 and stick to Angular 1, and this is why I think that, or why we should just throw out X technology completely, or why you only develop on a web IDE, or whatever it is. Like, pick something controversial that's polarizing, that's specific to your thing, right? And again, there might be other people out there like me that are teaching personal development for software developers, and in that case, sure, it probably is going to make sense for you to expand the boundary a little bit, but also be wary of your job and what you're, again, like I said, I come from a place, I told you that the two reasons why I'm willing to go wherever I need to go is because, one, I don't have there's no boss of me that can fire me or not like my post on Facebook and give me repercussions. I'm my own boss, and I don't even need the business. I've got real estate investments and money set up that I'm set for life. Not to brag, but I did that purposely, and that allowed, because I enjoy because freedom is my highest value in life, right? And secondly, the fact that I'm willing to live by a sword, die by a sword. I mean, that's a philosophy that I adopted. Not everyone is willing to make that choice. So I'd say, there's definitely some accuracy, a lot of accuracy in what you said, is that there's a lot of topics that, it might seem a little hypocritical sometimes when I say it, but I tell developers all the time, like, don't just be controversy for controversy. Don't just, I'm not saying share all your opinions and your politics and religion and don't hold anything back. I'm saying, like, yeah, exactly. And make sure it's relevant to your personal brand, because we all have a personal brand, and as long as it's relevant. For me, like I said, it's a pretty wide thing, but I feel like someone's got to do it, and that's the role that I've taken. But for most developers that are listening to this advice, it's not going to be in your best interest to broach most of these subjects. Like, go crazy on the controversial stuff that has to do with the technology, right? Don't be afraid. Don't let, people shunning you hold you back from talking about those things. But as far as those other bigger political issues and stuff, it's really not going to help your brand in most cases.
Okay, now that we've talked about the substance of the content that you make, as a content creator myself, I'm curious to hear your thoughts on the different mediums, because there's so many different mediums that you can go after these days. You can write, you can podcast, you can do video creation. And so, like, just asking for myself, because I'm trying to build this as a larger media channel, how do you see writing and podcasting and video creation? What are the differences across the different categories? What have your learnings been?
Yeah, that's a good one. That's interesting. I've seen people successful on each of the mediums, and what I have found is that which seems to work best for me. I've definitely got some favorites here, but a general philosophy in policy, I think, is to pick one medium to start off and be as prolific as hell on that medium, right? Like, one of the main strategies I have in life that almost is always successful is just to be as prolific as hell. Because when you're super prolific, that's getting up to bat and swinging a whole bunch of times. You're gonna hit. Not only are you gonna get hits eventually, but your arms are gonna get so strong from swinging those bats that you're actually gonna get that bat. You're actually gonna get good. And when you do get hits, they're gonna be good hits, right? So that's one strategy I think that you need to make sure that you employ. I think a lot of people, they take a scattershot approach. So they're like, okay, well, I'm going to create a podcast and a blog and a YouTube channel and social media and all that. And all that is great. And it can be really, really good. But the problem is, if you're only putting a trickle on each one of those, it's not going to be as impactful, right? That's a thing, right? So I would say focus on one. And as far as which one to focus on, I think there's a couple of things that come into play here. In my opinion and my experience, because I've been on all those mediums, video is the best format because of a couple of things. One, I mean, okay, with video, I've had podcasts and blog for a long time. And if I'm at a developer conference, yeah, sometimes someone will say, hey, I saw your Pluralsight video. Oh, you're John Sonmez. Or like, I heard your podcast, right? But literally being on YouTube, I'll be walking down the street. I mean, just this last week, twice when I went for a run, when I stopped my run, people came up to me and said, "Oh my God, it's John Sonmez," right? Because you actually create it's like being on TV. It's like being a celebrity. So that is powerful, because not only people are hearing your words, they're seeing you. They feel like they know you. They feel like you're a star to them, and so that is very, very powerful for building a brand. Just having that visual element. Now. And I didn't expect this, right? I mean, this was not something that I expected, because I had my blog for a long time, and right now I get about triple the views on my YouTube channel as I do page views on the blog. Like, the blog gets maybe like 250,000 views per month, but the YouTube channel gets like 700,000 views on videos per month. Now, I'm putting out a lot more content there. I'm putting out 2 to 3 videos a day there. So what I would say, though, is, so that's one factor, is I think video is the best medium possible. And then I would say that podcasting is probably the second, again, because you're in someone's ear for a long period of time. And then I think blogging is the worst right now, although it's also has the lowest barrier to entry. So when I tell developers starting out, I say create a blog, right? I've got a free blogging course that I usually send them to, and I say start there, because everyone can do that. It's got a low barrier to entry. It's a good place where you can start writing, and you can start, writing is the key skill that's going to develop any kind of communication for you anyway. You're not really going to be able to talk in front of a camera if you can't write, for the most part, right? Because you have to learn how to organize your thoughts. So, and then I would say the other factor to influence all of this is where is your strengths? So like, where do you want to go? I mean, you could develop strengths, but if you are a really strong writer and you just you don't have the camera presence, and you don't want to develop the camera presence, then blogging is going to be it for you, right? If you got a great radio voice, but again, you don't have the camera presence, then podcasting, could be it for you. But whatever you do, pick one medium, be prolific on that medium, and then expand to the other ones. And that's how you're going to find the most success. If you look at people if you just look at social media, you look at Instagram, you look at blogging, you look at Facebook and YouTube, you'll find that most people that have a very large following and a very large brand have one place that they are super prolific on. That's their main thing, right? And I think that's important to recognize, because there's, even if you look at someone like Tony Robbins, right? I think I went over to his YouTube channel and I think he had maybe like a few 100,000 subscribers. Not anywhere. You would think he might have millions of subscribers, but he doesn't, right? But or Tim Ferriss, I think the same deal there. His podcast is huge, but his YouTube channel not so much, right? And there's other people like PewDiePie, right? He's got a ridiculously huge YouTube channel, but I don't think he has a podcast, or he probably has a blog somewhere, but I've never seen it. So those are the kind of things I would keep in mind.
So you wrote a book about soft skills, and I've heard several podcasts where you talked about that. Your more recent book that you're working on is The Complete Software Developer's Career Guide. What's the diff between those two books? What is evolving in the narrative that you're trying to tell?
Sure. So with soft skills, the Software Developer's Life Manual, it was all about more on the personal development, right? There was a section on careers. There was a section on fitness and finance and productivity and learning and marketing yourself. And then on more of the mental game, the self-development, what I called spirit in that book. And so it was more on the holistic approach that I generally teach on my channel and on my blog. So that was important for what I feel like is really important just for everyone to grasp in life. But there was a lot of people that said, well, that career section, like everything was great, but that career section, I wish you would have expanded on that. Like there's so many questions I have on the career. And I looked out there and I was like, okay, there's really not a really good soft skills book on just the career of a software developer, telling someone how to get into the industry, what they need to learn, how to learn properly, how to do things like deal with your boss and deal with coworkers, how to deal with prejudice perhaps in the office, how to dress, how to go to an interview, how to get a raise, how to set yourself up for promotion, right? All of those type of things. And what exactly do you need to know? So I said, okay, two things were going on in my head. One of them was, look, I'm moving more into this personal development space, but I had a lot of success in my career as a developer, and I've talked to and coached and counseled so many developers. I've got so much wealth of information from my audience and from all these interactions I've had. I want to capture all that. So that was going on. And then the second thing was, I really want to create, the complete guide for software developers, where every single developer should have this book on their shelf. It's going to be valuable for everyone, and it really is what someone would say is the complete career guide. That's all soft skills approach, not technical information, but all from a soft skills. This is the tome, the manual you need to have a successful career as a software developer, and it answers all of your questions. And so that was the driving force. And I also, I'd say that a distant third would be just my masochism of wanting to write of the pain of writing another book. so that's where it came about. And that's really the difference, is that this book is completely focused on your career as a software developer from start to finish. It goes from the beginning of when you're starting out in your career and just getting into the field of software development, and all those questions, should you go to college or boot camp or self-educate, and if you, in whatever choice you choose, how's the best way to do it, to getting your first job or getting a new job as a software developer, and then transitions into all the stuff you need to know. There's so many things that new developers don't, and even existing developers don't know that they need to know, like source control, the basics of that, QA, continuous integration, all of those type of things, right? What is web development? What's embedded systems? What are all these things at a high level? And then finally going into the last two sections, which are, as a working software developer, what do you need to know? This is where I talked about the dress and working with your coworkers and boss and all of this. And then finally, the last section is more for, okay, now if you want to advance your career, where do you go from here? How do you actually take it to the next level? How do you do something like, consider creating a personal brand, or starting podcasts, or, getting out there and speaking at conferences, right? So I try to pretty much encompass, it's an 800-page book. at this point. So I try to pretty much encompass everything.
So a lot of the things that we cover on Software Engineering Daily are about what's changing in the technical world. So, for example, platform as a service makes it a lot easier to build and deploy apps that are reliable and scalable. You've got things like Firebase that can handle your database more easily, and it's all low cost. There's also changes like it's becoming easier to hire contract developers. Like contracting got a bad name in the 90s and the early 2000s because you couldn't do quality control, but now we've got really good talent marketplaces. It's much easier to hire contractors. So there's a lot of systemic changes to the world of software. So if you're thinking about like building a software product, it's gotten easier in certain ways. Does that impact how you think about the career guide for a software developer?
In some ways, yes, but I always try to think in terms of principles rather than in what I would call strategies or tactics, right? And so
This is more timeless stuff.
Exactly. Yeah. From everything I try to do, I try to as much as possible because that's evergreen. That's like you said, the timeless stuff. And so, from the book's perspective, yes, there'll probably be some things that will change. Some of the tools that I called out, the names might change, but I would say 95% of the content is going to be more on the higher principle level stuff. That's probably not going to change. Or like if it does, it'll be adaptable. Like you'll be able to figure out, okay, well, yeah, it was this, but this is what it means now, right? It should be pretty obvious from that. So not that I won't update the book ever. I probably will update the book, but I've always tried to focus on those higher level things. When I first was approached to write my first book, Soft Skills, Manning had approached me and they said, hey, you've got a pretty big audience. We'd love to, whatever book you want to write, we want you to write a book. Yeah, how about Android development? Because we know you've done some course. And I was like, you know what? If I'm going to spend the time to write a book, it's going to be a timeless book. It's going to be one that's going to sell for the next 10 years. It's not going to be some technology. And they're kind of shocked. They're like, well, you did all these Pluralsight courses on all these technologies and stuff. Why wouldn't you want to? You could easily catapult off of the back of that. And I said, no, I'm not going to write a book to make money. It doesn't make sense, right? So, and if I do, it's going to be something timeless. So I've tried to do that with, like I said, with most of the material that I put out, right? But definitely with books, because books you don't make much money on. It's true. And so you want them to sell for a long time. And really books should be something like that, right? I mean, the most valuable books I have on my bookshelf are books that are timeless, that have principles in them, that are not tactical based. There's definitely some value in tactical based things, but they change and they go out of date. And so, yeah, the field of software development, it's going to change. The way that we write code is going to look different, but the higher level principle is not going to change. Algorithms will always be algorithms, right? The process you go through to solve algorithms and a lot of the ways that you deal with your careers and a lot of the ways that you deal with people, right? Because you could almost say that everything that I write about is how to deal with people, because that's ultimately what all of us software developers are not do more than anything else, and that's ultimately what defines our success. So those things won't change.
So building a software company that's based in software that you're selling, that feels like a very different business than building a media company. Does it ever feel like, and I'm speaking firsthand, like Software Engineering Daily is a treadmill where I have to produce content on a regular basis, and certainly there are some evergreen qualities to it, but it's not exactly the same as writing, Windows 95 and just like selling that in perpetuity, and all you have to do to make it keep going is just printing more copies of Windows 95. Does it ever feel like the media business that you're in conflicts with the idea of software engineering, which is like building automated, scalable systems?
Well, it's kind of interesting because that you would say that, because there's a real big fallacy that most software developers have when they want to become entrepreneurs, which is they think that there's such a thing as passive income. And there's not. The closest thing to passive income is real estate, to be honest with you. Like, I have real estate investments that I hardly have to do anything with, and it just earns me money every month. But it costs a lot of money to do that and time to set that up. But with software, and this is why I say this is one of the biggest fallacies, because I get these emails all the time, right? All these people send me emails with their $1 million ideas, and I have to crush their dreams, and I have to reply back and say, you know what? While I was sitting on the toilet this morning, I had $10 million ideas, and they were all just as good as yours, right? And I'm not saying it to be mean. I'm not saying it to be conceited, because I believe that everyone has $1 million ideas. It's execution, but it's not just execution. See, that's the other thing is software developers think, oh well, I'm in a unique position. I can build this software, right? I can build this awesome software. Well, you know what? The biggest piece that you're missing is marketing, because that's the one thing. It's like marketing. Like it doesn't matter. And so let's say you build your awesome piece of software, right? If you don't have a way to sell that, if you don't have a sales pipeline, a sales funnel, a marketing funnel to be able to get people into that funnel to actually get exposure to what you're selling and then buy it, it doesn't matter. You could have the most fantastic piece of software ever built, but if you don't have that, you got nothing. You just wasted a whole bunch of time. So a lot of developers, they build these awesome applications and they think that they're just going to make money. They think if they build it, they will come. And it's so untrue. And they think that it could be automated, that if they just get this running. And yeah, I'm not saying that there's no way to automate stuff, right? I mean, for a good portion of my business is automated, right? I have a bunch of courses that I sell, and I have a bunch of YouTube videos and podcasts and blog posts, and I capture email addresses. People come to my blog and they sign up for a free course, and they put their email address in, or they find a YouTube video and they sign up, and they automatically go through an automated email funnel that will send them emails that will eventually offer them and pitch them my courses, and they sell automatically. But that won't run forever, right? That's like, I still need to create more content, and I will also need to adapt to the marketplace, right? I could take my hands off the wheel, and probably for the next 5 years, I think the revenue, could probably still be maybe like 20 to 30K a month, just with no one touching it, but it'll eventually go down. And it could eventually drop off completely, and Google could shut me down, right? Or there's a lot of factors that are involved in that. So if I want to keep the business going, I'll have to do it. So there's always a treadmill to business. I would highly advise to make things as automatable as possible. But I'll point you to a really good book though for the treadmill kind of thing. It's actually a really strange book. Another one by David Data called The Way of the Superior Man. And the very first chapter of the book is what I'd like to highlight. And the written version is important because the Audible version is a totally different thing. But so the Kindle or written version. And in the very first chapter of the book, he said something that highly impacted me, which he talked about this idea of like, it's never going to be done. It's never going to be finished. Stop waiting for things to be completed. Stop waiting for things to be finished. Stop saying when this is done. Just realize that, and I'm paraphrasing here, but essentially the battle begins anew each day, right? So I lived a lot of my life trying to say, okay, I just want to be done with this stuff, right? I just want to be off the treadmill. And what I realized is that no, that is life. and as soon as just having that realization that it's all there, no matter where you get to, there's always going to be new problems. There's always going to be new. You don't ever like. You don't go for a run and get your diet in order and lift some weights and then you're done. And like, okay, well, I'm done. I'm fit now. Aren't I fit now? No, every day you got to wake up and you got to get to the gym again. And you got to go, and eat healthy again. And you got to go for your run again, right? And so if your mindset is, and this is why a lot of people fail on diets, by the way, is because they think, okay, well, I just got to do this 6-week program and I got to get through till Friday and then I'm done. You're living in misery the whole freaking time. People live their business like that. They live their life like that. They live their career like that. And the whole time they're waiting for their life to be done so it can begin. It's insanity. But we get trapped in that. And so my answer to that is to say, no. If you recognize that there's always going to be a battle, that it's always going to be hard, that there's always going to be problems, if you're going to do a diet program, it's a lifestyle. You're going to be doing this for the rest of your life. But that's okay, and you embrace that. Now everything is a challenge. Now your perspective is different. Now you're like, okay, well, I'm going to keep recording. For me, I'm doing 2 to 3 YouTube videos a day. I'm not looking forward to the day when I can stop. I'm not saying I'm going to do it forever, but I'm saying that every day I wake up and I'm like, all right, let's create some more videos today, right? And that's the shift in the difference there that I think is more important than the issue of, what kind of business is more automatable or not, or can you ever have a passive income business? Because the chances are, if you're looking for that, and the reason why you're looking for that is so that you can get off the treadmill of life, you're going to be sorely disappointed because it's never going to happen. Instead, you just need to embrace the treadmill of life and say, look, I'm always going to go to the gym and have to lift weights to maintain what I've got. I'm always going to have to face a new challenge or fight new battles or have a fight with my, I'm never going to have perfect relationships. I'm going to have fights with my spouse and my kids and all that, but that's cool. That's all right. That's okay. That's what life is. I'm not waiting for everything to settle down. I'm jumping into the fray.
Okay. Great way to conclude. John, thanks for coming on Software Engineering Daily. It's been great talking to you.
Yeah, thanks, Jeff. Man, you are awesome. You have brought a ton of depth, I have to say, with the questions that you've asked. You've asked some just fantastic. One of the best interviews I think that I've had the opportunity to be on. So,
appreciate that. And thanks for bringing all your content. I mean, I remember I listened to your software engineering radio interview about soft skills. And I thought I was pleasantly surprised with how interesting it was. So. Cool. Good material. At Software Engineering Daily, we need to keep our metrics reliable. If a botnet started listening to all of our episodes and we had nothing to stop it, our statistics would be corrupted. We would have no way to know whether a listen came from a bot or from a real user. That's why we use Encapsula to stop attackers and improve performance. When a listener makes a request to play an episode of Software Engineering Daily, Encapsula checks that request before it reaches our servers and filters bot traffic, preventing it from ever reaching us. Botnets and DDoS attacks are not just a threat to podcasts. They can impact your application too. Encapsula can protect your API servers and your microservices from responding to unwanted requests. To try Encapsula for yourself, go to encapsula.com/sedaily and get a month of Encapsula for free. Encapsula's API gives you control over the security and performance of your application, whether you have a complex microservices architecture or a WordPress site like Software Engineering Daily. Encapsula has a global network of over 30 data centers that optimize routing and cache your content. The same network of data centers that is filtering your content for attackers is operating as a CDN and speeding up your application. To try Encapsula today, go to encapsula.com/sedaily and check it out. Thanks again, Encapsula.
Wow!